Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation. This is this week's issue of the Libertarian Angle. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Richard Ebeling, who teaches economics at the Citadel. Richard, welcome back for another round of the Libertarian Angle.
Great to be here again. Welcome to all of our viewers and listeners.
Yeah, you know, with all the Donald Trump phenomenon, I thought maybe that you and I would discuss this, especially because now you got some libertarians who are supporting Trump. So I thought, hey, why don't we analyze the particular reasons that we can come up with for the Trump phenomenon? Why are so many people attracted to Trump, his philosophy, his program, his personality, including libertarians? Because clearly Donald Trump is not a libertarian. I think everybody would agree with that. And so I thought we'd explore why it is that some libertarians are saying, hey, man, well, let's join up with the Trump campaign. So why don't you take it away, give me your initial thoughts, and then I'll come back and give you mine.
Well, in many ways, the commentators, the news pundits have at least part of the story correct. People are very frustrated. They see politicians promise things, whether Democrats or Republican, liberal or conservative, and we see things that have been promised not being fulfilled. They see corruption, hypocrisy, power lusting. They see the influence of lobbying and panhandling in Washington, D.C., as special interest groups try to put their hands in other people's cookie jars through the fiscal redistributive system. And these people feeling that they're open to manipulation and abuse by those in political power and other social and economic forces buffeting the worlds in which they live in, have found him appealing, because Trump says these things. He says, I'm an outsider. I've played the game. I gave to both Republicans and Democrats. I know why the system works like this. I know its ins and outs and its frustrations and ineffectiveness. Elect me, support me, and I can correct the problem because I know the nature of the beast, having been inside of it, and I can't be corrupted because I'm funding my own campaign. Then there are those who, again, the pundits have pointed out, who when they ask existing or prospective Trump supporters what they find attractive in him as a president, they'll say things, well, he has business acumen. He's been a leader. He knows how to run an enterprise. He'll make things run in a business-like fashion. That seems not to be the case in Washington today, with the waste and abuse and the squandering of resources. And then I think that there's the other appeal that again the pundits have pointed out, and that is his in-your-face about political correctness. The fact is that large segments of the population have gotten tired of being told what they can say, how they can say it, always tiptoeing around because something that you do or say might be viewed as socially offensive or unacceptable, with resulting social disgrace or even political or legal action taken against you. He says it as it is, as supporters say. Then there's also the appeal, above all of that, is just the idea of the strong leader, the strong man who will ride in on the white horse and guide and direct things. The problem with this is that there's always the fallacy of putting the right man in office, because there's never a right man in office, because no one has the power, knowledge, or ability to redesign society, just in the intellectual sense. And as Acton once said, nothing corrupts more than absolute power. And as a result of this hope and this appeal to the great leader is not unusual. You've seen it in many type of authoritarian regimes throughout history, from Julius Caesar in the ancient world to a Mussolini in modern times, who can arouse the masses with rhetoric and appeal to redress grievances that they believe they have, whether sound or not, whether reasonable or not. And that will sort of, in a utopian fashion, clear the field. Because what does Trump say? I know how to make deals. I will make America great. We'll be huge. We'll be beautiful. Have so many wins you get tired of winning, but I won't let you stop winning. I will build a wall that will overcome all of your fears about immigration, culturally or economically, and I'll make someone else pay for it. There's all these promises that he waves across. The danger with this, just to continue a little bit more with this, Jacob, is that central to these criticisms that he's making in society is a foundation based upon a wrong understanding of the economic and social world in which we live. What do I mean by that? One instance of this clearly would be his idea of what would he do about Social Security. Well, you listen to him and he says he's not going to do anything about Social Security. It's good, it's right, it's just. Well, how are you going to fund it? There are the demographic trends going on with Social Security. Don't worry, we're going to make the economy great. We're going to make it grow, and a growing economy will supply all the revenues to maintain the existing levels of promised redistribution of wealth through Social Security. Then Obamacare, or health care in general. What does he say? Yes, Obamacare needs to be scrapped. All you need is to allow insurance companies to compete across state lines. He says nothing about Medicare, Medicaid, the very principle of government involved in national health care at all. As far as I can say, he thinks it's good and beautiful and huge, and somehow he'll generate this wealth like a horn of plenty, like manna from heaven, that will cover all the expenses. And he knows how to cut a deal to get better prices for pharmaceuticals. You go down the list. How does he think private enterprise should work? Well, he has said publicly in these debates that he thinks eminent domain is good. Not only has he attempted and used it for his own private gain in having other people's land and property expropriated for his own business interests, but he considers that this is a technique that should be at the center of how government manages its affairs in redesigning the society and what land and resources are used for. Then in general, he talks about free, business and free enterprise, but it is clear that his conception of business is these government business partnerships. All you need is to have good deals, good bargainings, good negotiators, and he has the people who will do this. All of this sets the stage for just on these economic issues. A man who has the arrogance and the hubris to believe that he can just set things right without creating any pain or hardship for anyone by preserving the institutions and the structure of the interventionist regulatory state. That doesn't even touch upon, then, his foreign policy views. Has he been critical of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, though he seems to have had different public stated views about whether he was for or against toppling Saddam Hussein. But he says, yes, that these things are not in our interest. But then what does he say? We're going to deal with ISIS, and we're going to bomb them into oblivion. And if necessary, if we need thousands of soldiers on the ground, they'll be there. Now, one can easily ask, well, how does he know the right things to do in foreign policy, separate from the issue of whether America should be trying to set the world right, other than merely protecting the rights of their own citizens within the United States? When asked this on MSNBC, what did he say? He gave no answer about who his advisors or his consultants are in foreign policy. I think about this a lot. I have had big ideas. I'm the one I consult with. The ego, the hubris, the arrogance. This is like the epitome of the central planner. The person that Adam Smith warned about in The Wealth of Nations, that no one is so dangerous as the statesman who has the folly and presumption that he knows enough to manage and direct other people's lives. Well, not only does he have the folly and presumption and arrogance of planning all of these domestic affairs, which will be huge and great and beautiful, but he knows how to just be guided with America's place in the world without one damn advisor. It's not a matter of what good advisor or bad advisor. He doesn't need it. The only person he listens to is himself. Now, and then there is the final element in this, that again, a number of pundits, both conservative and modern liberal, have pointed out, and correctly. His playing to the mob, his playing to the crowd. A study was done about what level language are the candidates in this year's election using. What level in grade school language are you using? Most of them are using language somewhere between the 6th and the 8th grade. So if you're somewhere between the 6th and the 8th grade of education, you're probably understanding what these politicians are saying on TV. But in Trump's case, it's below 6th grade level. It's in the 5th grade level, the lowest common denominator. It's not surprising that he said at one point he loves the uneducated. Clearly, he's pinpointing some of them. And then the one other aspect of this is that and pundits again have pointed this out, the aura of the authoritarian mobster, his getting up and saying about demonstrators, I wish I could punch him out. There were days when we'd send him out on a stretcher. If one of my supporters roughs up a demonstrator, don't worry, I'll cover their legal expenses. And then this statement is that is as sort of fostering his supporters at these rallies to physically get into a confrontation with some demonstrators. What does he say? Isn't this more fun than listening to a boring campaign speech? I mean, he's playing and pandering to the worst and the lowest elements of people. When these people critics make comparisons to a Mussolini or a Hitler or a third world dictator playing to the masses to arouse indignation and a rising up through potential violence to put down others. These are serious matters, including Jacob, his statement that he doesn't like what the media says, so maybe he's going to have to change the libel laws so that he can deal with them through lawsuits to intimidate them and put them in their place. All of these bode poorly. Now, to what a presidency under Donald Trump would represent. Now, having said all that, what's rest in the field? Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders are just way out there. They're collectivists. They're statists. They're either a statist socialist or a semi-hidden socialist. And on the rest of the remaining Republican field, you have Kasich, who insists with his waving of his arms. I mean, this guy needs to have super glue with his arms glued to the side of his legs. I have been governor of Ohio. I have created jobs. I've created industry. I've brought people together. I've walked on water. I've turned water into wine. I mean, and ad nauseum. And all you need to do is that he knows how to run things, and he'll set everything right. And what about Ted Cruz? Now, Ted Cruz has at least talks about the Constitution. He talks about limiting government. He talks about getting government out of the marketplace. He talks about cutting taxes and respect for individual rights. But these were all combined with extremely aggressive views on foreign policy and mixed signals about how he views the national security state. So the fact is that we have bad, worse, and worst among all of these candidates. But the worst of this, in terms of content or lack thereof, and rhetoric and personality, and therefore danger to the very notion of a limited government where you have rule of law rather than an arrogant rule of a man, Donald Trump weighs in as the worst in all the field as a personality.
Yeah, that's
Jacob, have I seemed too critical?
Well, a little bit. I mean, your analysis is about as good as any I've read. I want to take things back to a more fundamental level. I mean,
sure.
If you go back to the 1930s, you see this dramatic shift of America. They called it saving the free enterprise system, but it was nothing of the sort. It was really a rejection of everything that had gone before in terms of economics, economic liberty, free markets, in favor of what we now know as the welfare state. And then about 1945 to 1950 is the other half of this apparatus that we now know as the national security state or the warfare state. Those two apparatuses, the welfare state and the warfare state, dramatically changed America's governmental system. And the welfare state, the government became the primary purpose of the federal government came to be taking care of people, watching over them, punishing them when they made wrong decisions like ingesting the wrong drugs or not sharing with their parents. And what Social Security is all about, mandatory sharing, Medicare. And the national security state, the government became the world's policeman. The anti-communism became the new crusade. Everything changed. And over that period of time, all the way up through the day, the Republicans, who initially were standing against at least the welfare state, they made peace with the New Deal and the welfare state. And the liberals, who were initially standing, well, I guess not all of them, since it was Truman that was supporting the warfare state. But over the years, they made peace with the warfare state. I mean, Sanders had some good comments back in the 70s about abolishing the CIA and talking about some of the horrors of the national security state, the CIA. But he's all washed up as far as those objections are concerned. He doesn't dare repeat them for fear of not being perceived to be credible. Now, as the decades passed, you had these enormous problems occurring in American life. The debasement of the dollar. I mean, there's a reason why we don't carry silver dollars anymore, or silver dimes, or silver quarters, because the Fed, to fund this gigantic warfare state machine, was overinflating the money, driving the good money out of circulation. You got massive amounts of debt that are being piled onto the government and indirectly the American people. That's what the debt ceiling raising is all about. The war on poverty that Lyndon Johnson was waging is obviously a total disaster, because all we hear from the left is how many more poor people we have in America. And so people are struggling. Nobody saves any money anymore, and they're even exhorted not to save. They're exhorted to go to the mall and spend. That's the cause of prosperity. And then you've got daily assassinations taking place. You've got a government that now has the power to assassinate Americans, to torture Americans. The federal courts have had this long history now since the 1950s of deferring to the national security state. They've upheld these powers. Overseas, the government has killed well over 1 million people. And yet Americans over here just act like, oh, well, life goes on. Got to go to my sporting event, watch my flyovers. But everybody recognizes that something's not right with this whole thing. I mean, they're upset. They're angry, as you point out. The problem, though, is that they're not ready to let go of these apparatuses. In fact, many of them don't even know that these apparatuses are the cause of America's woes. And so they look for the great man. Oh, well, the Donald Trump will finally make this machine work. These old establishment politicians, they've just failed to do the job. But Donald Trump's a businessman. He's going to make the warfare state finally work. He's going to make those Amtrak trains run on time. And so instead of looking at the root cause of the problem, they're still embracing the problem and looking for the great man to make it work. So I agree with you. I think a lot of his appeal is that he's the anti-establishment guy. He's going to come in and really run the American government like a business. But there's also his positions, Richard. I mean, notice that nobody's attacking him on a substantive basis on the point of his positions, his philosophy. The reason for that is because, to me, he is the very model of the Democrat-Republican model. I mean, look at his positions. As you know, I've argued for many years now that the Democratic-Republican Party is really just one party, divided into two wings. And all they're fighting for is not over philosophy. That's a charade that the mainstream media tries to uphold. They're fighting over control. Who's going to get to kill more people in the Middle East? Who's going to manage the levers of death and destruction? Who's going to be able to give out more largesse with the welfare state? But the problem is over control. Notice his call for a trade war. Democrats and Republicans have favored trade restrictions for decades. That's what embargo's about, sanctions. Ask the people of Cuba, Iran, North Korea about trade restrictions that have been imposed on them by both Democrats and Republicans. He favors immigration controls. Okay, they might object to a Berlin Wall, but both parties favored the Berlin Fence that was built down there. They both favored eminent domain to build that government wall. They favored mass deportations. The highway checkpoints on the highways in the Southwest, the roving Border Patrol checkpoints, the raids on private businesses, the drug war, he's going to wage it. That's a war that Democrats and Republicans have waged for decades. The foreign interventions, okay, there may be objections on Iraq or this country or that, but they're all foreign interventionists. They all want to kill more people. They think that's the solution to America's woes, to just keep killing people in the Middle East. I mean, if you go down all his programs, to me, he is the very model of a Democrat Republican. And so, what's his appeal? I think his appeal is that he's like a chameleon. He knows how to change his colors in accordance with what audience he's in favor. If he's in favor of a lower educated audience that hates immigrants, man, he's going to go over there and bash the heck out of Mexican illegal immigrants, call them rapists and murderers and so forth. If he's for this audience, he's going to, like in the Midwest, he's going to say, oh, I'm a big trade barrier person. I'm a protectionist. And with the Libertarians, he's changing a little color there and saying, well, I'm really skeptical about Iraq, and I'm kind of skeptical about all this killing over there. So now you got all these Libertarians that say, boy, I love that color. I'll go for Trump. I mean, the guy's a master at changing colors. But ultimately, Richard, I agree with you. I mean, it's a very dangerous thing. The man is very volatile. He's got a temper on him like nobody can imagine, and he really believes himself to be the great man. I could easily see him doing the types of things that Franklin Roosevelt did and worse, running over the Supreme Court, ignoring court rulings, using the troops to his advantage whenever he needs the troops or the CIA, ignoring Congress, court packing schemes. I mean, all the things that Roosevelt was doing. And so, yeah, I agree with you. This is a very, very dangerous thing, in large part because there is a large segment of Americans who really support him. And finally, on one more point about the lower educated part of Americans favoring this guy. I mean, that's the real advantage of the other government program that is involved here. Public schooling, the dumbing down of America. I mean, now they're finally getting the repercussions from this dumbing down, where they destroy people's ability to think and to analyze, and they create this mindset of deference. I think it's now playing out in deference to this man who's now being perceived as this great leader who's going to lead America back to greatness, when really you and I both know it's going to be a really bad thing if that comes to pass.
I agree. See, the point that you're hammering away at here is obviously central and crucial. And that is, what is it that Donald Trump proposes or advocates that one does not hear from one or more of the other candidates, either in the Democratic side or the Republican side? Only he does it in a more extreme or dramatic or emotionally appealing way. What Republican has not advocated some kind of a wall on the Mexican border? What Republican has not advocated further military intensified involvement in the Middle East to stabilize Iraq, to wipe out the Islamic State, to assure some type of new government in Libya, on and on and on, in Syria as well? Which one of them has not advocated that and has promised to wipe out the enemies of America? Which Democrat has not insisted, either Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, which one of them has not proposed an intensification of the welfare state, of the further intrusiveness of government either regulating the private sector or taxing its wealth away to fund the largesse that comes out of Washington, D.C.? Why should we be surprised that he has an appeal on sounding tough, on such things as the enemies both outside and in America, when both Republicans and Democrats have been quite willing to both support, either through enthusiasm or acquiescence, in the establishment and this growth of the surveillance state, which is a deep violation of the constitutional rights of an individual to be secure in his person and his property, and to have his freedom of speech in the press and association guarded as the First Amendment requires. All of them have advocated some form of abridgment or breaking or reduction of these constitutional liberties. So Trump comes along and he says, punch this guy out. Send him out on a stretcher. It's more fun for a violent brawl than to listen to a campaign speech. I'll pay your legal expenses. All of this, his business with the reporters and the libel laws, as I mentioned earlier, all of this, his insistence upon preserving the welfare state, which no Republican or Democrat has called for the elimination of. Oh, it's demographically in trouble. We need to tweak it. We need to modify it. But the fact is, he encapsulates the worst features of both what Democrats and Republicans have offered. You're right, in a strange hybrid chameleon form that is dangerous precisely because of his appeal and his power to attract people and to persuade him. He's a master, even in the technique of campaigning. You notice, Rubio is gone. He no longer needs to beat up opponents. So what does he tell Fox News and others? No more debates. It's a waste of time. I've answered all those questions. I don't want to talk to you. I want to have nothing to do with you. He's just going to go through the rest of the primaries, get his delegate count, and run to the convention, hopefully to win. Notice also what kind of a rule of law is it, even in private affairs of a private organization, which technically the Republican Party is, right? It's not a government agency. When he says, well, the rule may say that I need these, 1,230-something votes to have a majority. Well, if I'm just closer to the others, to that number than the others are, I should be assured that I'm the nominee of the party. Or, well, I'm not advocating anything, but there could be riots by my supporters. That's like the mob leaders saying, if Guido the Knife wasn't around anymore, I sure would feel better. He's not telling his henchmen to get rid of Guido the Knife, but then, you know what? 2 days later, nobody ever sees or hears from Guido again. He's playing that same game. That's what makes him so dangerous. And it's not only the fact that so many American voters and citizens have been sucked into this, but the danger, in my opinion, folly of some libertarians thinking that there is some redeeming qualities in him that would make him preferable to any other candidate to support. It's another issue as to whether, you pick between the lesser of evils and you decide to hold your nose and vote or not vote. But the idea that he could be the one that you could find anything as having redeeming qualities to place above the rest, to actually give your public and involved endorsement and support of, is from my point of view beyond the pale.
Yeah, I mean, you could even have Democrats voting for him because he says that he's going to preserve Social Security and keep it in its present form, when everybody knows that it's bankrupt and the young people cannot possibly sustain the economic and financial burden of having their money taken from them to give to seniors. And then Kasich is over there expanding Obamacare, Medicaid in his state, or Medicare, I can't remember which one. I mean, they're all alike. But your point about the riots thing is really, really critical, because you hit the nail on the head. This is a system where you have to get 50% plus one vote to win. And right. So it looks to me like he may go through the primary and caucus season and not have that number of votes. He may be close to it. Well, you go to a convention and majority rules. If you don't get a majority, then you lose. And so if after the first vote he doesn't have a majority, there may be delegates shifting around. They could come up with somebody entirely new. That's what the rules provide. That's how a democratic system works. And I agree with you. With his suggestion, there could be riots if those delegates don't switch their votes to me to put me over the top. He is essentially, indirectly, calling for those or scaring people into believing that he's calling for these riots. I mean, he's really trying to intimidate people with that kind of statement.
This is intimidation politics of the most crude and brutal type. This is the type of thing that we expect to see in third world countries. These typical ideas of the third world generalissimo who goes through the appearance of a democratic election and winning the support of the people, but all the time he's manipulating himself into power and doing anything to keep power. This is America sinking to the level of a third world authoritarian state, if this is the end of the road that we follow.
Yeah, or another analogy is the old bully on the playground when we were all in grade school or high school. We all had that bully that was bigger than everyone else and just would walk around saying, this is what I'm going to do and this is what you're going to do, and start pushing you around. I mean, that's what he is. He's a great big bully. And he's accustomed to getting his way through the bullying tactics that he exercises. We're about out of time, Richard, but I think it's incumbent on us to just address the libertarian solution to all this. Is that, and you intimated this, that we stand for a society where there is no great man running the economy, where there's nobody running the economy. We don't believe in a government-run economy. We believe that people should be free to manage their own lives, including their own retirement, their own charitable decisions, their own savings, their own families, their own decisions on what to do with what they ingest. In other words, a life where people are free to live their lives the way they choose. And that's really what our heritage is as Americans. Now, we know there were violations of that heritage with slavery and tariffs and other such things, but that overall, that heritage is expressed in the Declaration of Independence. It isn't a heritage that looks to the great man to make impossible things work, like the welfare-warfare state. It necessarily entails a dismantling of all this socialist structure and all this imperialist structure, and freeing up the private sector, freeing up the American people to interact with each other, trade with each other, to live harmoniously and peacefully amongst themselves and with the people of the world. That's really the only solution to all this, Richard, as I see it. What do you think?
I agree. The fact is that a system of freedom is based upon a number of things. Socially and ethically, a belief in and a respect for the individual rights of the citizenry to their life, liberty, and honestly acquired property. A constitution that limits government to those limited and enumerated functions that are considered essential for peace and order in the society. And finally, the rule of law. The rule of law that says there is the same rule for all. No one is above the law, no one is below the law, and one may not violate the law and its procedures and its statements for personal gain through abridgment and abuse. Unless those stand that way, those three principles: individual rights and liberty, limited constitutional government with few and enumerated, though essential functions, and a respect for the rule of law, so that there is rule of law and not of men. If we lose that, then there's no chance for freedom in America or any other place in the world. We've seen too many societies where those three ingredients neither exist or at least not respected, and they tend up being tyrannies that lead to terrible abuse and economic poverty.
On that note, it's a great note to finish up on. That wraps up this week's issue of the Libertarian Angle. Richard, enjoyed it as always.
My pleasure as always. See you next time.
And we'll see you all next time. Thank you.